as Dr. King stood on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial to remind America of a fierce urgency of now. I stand in the pulpit of New Life Church to remind you that even in your own life, there's a fierce urgency of now. Oftentimes we fail to recognize how important now is. But here it is. If you're looking to take any notes, this is the one note I want you to write down. This is what I want you to tweet and post on your Facebook status. Here it is. Right now eventually will become our back then. And our back then will eventually affect our right now. I'll give it to you again. Right now will eventually become your back then. And your back then will eventually affect your right now. Let me give you an example. The reason some of you are in debt right now is because of what the decisions you bought back then. The reason you can't pay some of your bills, but you got to pay that credit card is because back then you opened the credit cards you didn't need. The reason you can't sleep at night, you got worries and all these things in your mind because of the decisions you made back then. And back then will eventually affect your right now. But that's not everybody's testimony, because there are some people that say, David, I sleep good at night. And the reason you sleep good at night right now is because you left that nappy head joker back then. The reason you feel good about yourself because you left her back then. The reason you don't have any worries, the reason you're not stressing, because back then you gave your cares to Jesus. The reason you are where you are is because of the decisions you made. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Back then. Even in your own life, there's a fierce urgency of now. Because your right now will eventually become your back then. And your back then will eventually affect your right now. But in the sake of being corporate and being in community, I don't want to just leave it on the individuals in this room. But can I talk to the church? Yes, sir. Even in the church, our right now eventually becomes our back then, and our back then becomes our right now. Isn't it interesting, most of the time in our faith, we like to celebrate what God did. And then we like to anticipate what God is going to do. But oftentimes in the midst of celebrating what God has done, and in the midst of anticipating what God is going to do, we fail to recognize what God is doing right now. There's nothing wrong with celebrating what God did. It's good to give testimonies. It's good to recognize what Jesus did for you back in 92. It's good to recognize what God did for you last week. Then it's good to anticipate what God is going to do. It's good to anticipate and show how you have faith that God is going to work in your life. It's good to do all those things, but we can never fail to neglect what God is doing right now. Amen. Power of 30. Yes, as New Life is beginning to journey towards their 30th year anniversary. I know many people will remember walking from the old location to this location. I remember people will call on the name of past members and past pastors, and I know you're going to celebrate what God is going to do, and I know what you're going to anticipate what God is going to do, but I have to ask you, what is God doing right now? Right now. Yes, Lord. What is God doing? Help us, Lord. Right now. I got to know what God is doing right now, because my right now will eventually become my back then, and my back then will affect my right now.